All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a look at Kristi Noem's time as Secretary of Homeland Security.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got a really interesting mix of sources here.
Huh?
News clips, transcripts, even some deep strategic analysis
Interesting.
to really get a sense of her actions and policies.
Cool.
So if you're at all interested in immigration, border security, or really just how national security is changing, this is going to be a fascinating one.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, right off the bat, one thing that really jumps out at me is how much Noem's leadership at DHS seems connected to her, well, her own story.
Yeah, it's striking right away.
Like she went from a ranch in South Dakota running small businesses all the way to this huge federal agency.
Right.
How do you even begin to think about how those experiences shaped her approach to leadership at DHS?
Well, I think her early career might explain her strong emphasis on action, like making decisive choices and projecting this image of control. You know, when those leaks happened at DHS, she instantly vowed to prosecute those responsible.
Oh, yeah. And she didn't just say that quietly either.
Right.
We have a clip here from Forbes Breaking News where she declares, "We have identified 2 leakers who have been telling individuals about our operations and putting law enforcement lives in jeopardy. We plan to prosecute these 2 individuals."
Wow.
Talk about a direct message.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of what I mean.
Okay,
Her language is strong, almost like a warning shot.
definitely.
And this desire to control the narrative, project that strength, that's something we see throughout her time at DHS.
Makes you wonder what kind of culture that creates within DHS, right?
Right.
Like, is it one where people feel comfortable speaking up, or do they worry about dissent?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads us to another example of her assertive approach, the use of polygraphs on DHS employees.
Oh, yeah.
That caused a lot of controversy.
A lot.
But she defended it vigorously.
To be fair, she did. We have a clip from MSNBC where Noem states that she has broad and extensive authorities, and we use every single one of them to ensure compliance and safety. So was she acting within her authority, or was it an overreach? I feel like legal scholars and political commentators are still arguing about this today.
Definitely still debated.
And what about the practical side of things? Did those polygraphs actually make DHS more secure?
Right.
Or do they just create a culture of suspicion and fear, maybe discouraging people from reporting real problems?
You know, those are excellent points, and they really highlight how complex it is to evaluate her actions.
Yeah.
There's the intended effect of a policy, sure, but then there are always these unintended consequences.
Okay, let's back up a bit and look at her policy initiatives as a whole.
Okay.
We have this document, DHS under Noem, a strategic analysis. It lays out her goals and strategies and even includes a SWOT analysis.
Oh, wow.
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
A real peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff.
So what jumps out at you?
Well, one thing that's immediately clear is her focus on border security.
Yeah, that's front and center.
It's clearly a top priority for her, and it lines up perfectly with the Trump administration's agenda.
Definitely.
We even have a clip from Face the Nation where she states, "We've seen incredible progress as far as what we've been able to stop at the southern border since President Trump has taken office." Pretty bold claim.
It definitely reflects the confidence she consistently had about this issue.
Yeah.
She had this multi-pronged approach, sending military to the border, increasing collaboration with Mexico, even investing in advanced technologies, you know, AI-powered surveillance and things like that.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it?
But how effective was it all, really?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Okay.
We have data from both Noem and her critics, and you can probably guess they tell very different stories.
I can imagine.
Noem, for her part, often talked about record lows in border crossings.
She even said in another Face the Nation interview that they were at a 25-year low.
Right, but then you have groups like Name of Group 1 and Name of Group 2 pushing back.
Okay.
They point to different metrics, question her methods.
So are they saying that even if apprehensions were down, illegal activity was still happening?
Exactly.
So who's right? It seems like, it depends on which numbers you choose to believe.
It really highlights the importance of looking beyond the headlines, you know? Border security, it depends on so many different things.
Yeah.
It's never as simple as just counting the number of people apprehended.
And that brings us to Noem's approach to immigration itself, which, I don't know, it was bold.
Yeah, bold is one way to put it.
She championed this very tough stance, resonated with her base, but definitely generated some controversy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, take, for instance, her deputizing up to 600 State Department employees to help with immigration enforcement.
Wait, State Department, that's unusual.
Right. This is from a Washington Examiner piece. You usually think of the State Department handling diplomacy and international relations.
Right. Immigration enforcement is more of a DHS thing.
Exactly. So this move raised a lot of questions.
Yeah, like, was the State Department even equipped for this?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of message does that send to other countries?
Right. Does it blur the lines between diplomacy and law enforcement in a way that hurts those relationships?
Those are valid concerns.
Yeah.
It was a very controversial decision.
Definitely.
Shows how willing Noem was to push boundaries and use every resource she could.
Then there's the crackdown on sanctuary cities.
Oh, right.
This PBS NewsHour clip shows her announcing the end of what DHS called sensitive locations,
Okay.
essentially allowing IC to make arrests at schools and hospitals.
Places that have previously been off limits.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a huge shift.
It is.
You know, advocates for immigrants, educators, healthcare providers, they pushed back hard on this.
Oh, yeah. They argued it created this climate of fear, making people less likely to seek help or report crimes.
Right, less likely to even go to those essential places.
But Noem's counter-argument was that these policies were protecting criminals,
Okay.
undermining the rule of law.
It's a classic example of the ideological divide on immigration.
Yeah.
Noem, firmly on the side of strict enforcement, her critics arguing for a more, well, humane and nuanced approach.
And it wasn't just sanctuary cities.
No.
She even went so far as to ask the IRS to help IC deport people.
Wait, the IRS?
Yeah, the IRS.
That's fascinating.
I don't know.
I mean, you think of them collecting taxes, not enforcing immigration laws.
Right.
So this is another example of Noem kind of going beyond those traditional agency roles.
Yeah.
She really wasn't afraid to, like, think outside the box and use whatever tools she could find.
It definitely sends a pretty chilling message, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Getting a letter from the IRS about your immigration status.
Adds a whole new layer of fear to the process.
It does.
And is that really the best use of the IRS's resources? Are they even equipped for that?
Those are questions that people were debating then, and we're still asking today.
It's true.
It's such a good example of how her actions sparked these bigger conversations
Yeah.
about the role of government, the balance of power, even the limits of executive authority.
Absolutely.
Speaking of executive authority, let's circle back to those DHS leaks.
The ones she was going to prosecute.
Yeah, remember how she first pointed the finger at the FBI?
Oh, yeah.
Claimed they were the source of the leaks?
Right.
Then there's this raging Patriot news piece where she accuses them of leaking ICE operations details.
Interesting.
It seemed like she was trying to shift the blame, you know?
It makes you wonder why she was so quick to blame the FBI.
Yeah.
Was she really convinced they were responsible, or was there some other reason to take the attention away from DHS?
It's hard to know for sure, but it definitely makes the story even more complicated. Really highlights the importance of understanding the political situation surrounding all this.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. It wasn't just about finding the leakers. It was about controlling the narrative, the message, asserting her authority.
And all this was happening while changes were being made to the collective bargaining agreement for TSA employees.
Interesting.
This Queen City News segment even suggests that the Trump administration might have been using those leaks to justify weakening the union.
Oh, wow.
So was the crackdown on leaks partly about reshaping the TSA and reducing the union's power?
That's an intriguing possibility.
It is, isn't it?
It suggests Noem's actions were part of something bigger.
Yeah.
A political strategy that went beyond just protecting information.
Things are never as simple as they seem, huh?
That's for sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Her background, leadership style that focus on border security, the tough stance on immigration, the leaks, even involving the IRS.
It's a lot.
What does it all mean? What's the big takeaway here?
Well, I think one of the main things we can see is that Noem's time at DHS was a period of huge change, upheaval. Even she challenged how we think about the role of DHS. Push the limits of executive power, implement policies that really affected people's lives.
She was definitely a divisive figure.
For sure.
But there's no denying that she left a mark on DHS.
Right.
And on how we talk about security and immigration in this country.
Absolutely. Her time there raises these big questions about where Homeland Security is going, you know, the balance between security and individual rights, even America's place in a globalized world.
Those are questions we're still grappling with today.
Yeah, and we'll be dealing with them for years to come.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive into Kristi Noem's time as Secretary of Homeland Security.
Wow, what a part.
But we're just getting started.
Can't wait for more.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Kristi Noem's time leading Homeland Security.
Okay.
In the last part, we really got into her background, leadership style, and some of those, well, pretty controversial policies.
Yeah, definitely some big ones.
Now, I'm curious, what were the bigger ripple effects? I mean, did those policies have consequences beyond U.S. borders?
Oh, absolutely. Noam's actions at DHS had a huge impact on the global stage,
Right.
especially when it comes to relationships with other countries.
Makes sense.
Like, think about Mexico.
Oh, right.
It really became a focal point for her.
Yeah, we saw those policies. Deploying the National Guard to the border, increasing cooperation with Mexican authorities on things like drug trafficking and immigration enforcement.
Her approach to Mexico was, it was interesting.
That's so.
Well, on the one hand, she was applying pressure,
Okay.
sometimes using pretty strong rhetoric, even threats of tariffs, to get them to cooperate more on border security.
Yeah, we even have a clip here.
Oh, perfect.
It's from news source named Noem's addressing some reporters, and she says flat out, Mexico needs to do more to secure its own borders and prevent the flow of illegal immigrants and drugs into the United States. We're prepared to take whatever actions are necessary to protect our national interests.
That's pretty direct.
Yeah, it definitely captures that assertive stance.
But at the same time, she also understood that it was important to keep a working relationship with Mexico.
Right. I mean, shared border,
Yeah.
deep economic ties, all that.
Exactly. So it was a delicate balancing act.
How do you think it actually played out in terms of U.S.-Mexico relations?
I mean, it's mixed. There were some positives for sure, like increased intelligence sharing, joint operations targeting drug cartels. But there were also definitely moments of tension.
Okay.
Some Mexican officials felt like her approach was too, I don't know, too heavy-handed, like she wasn't respecting their sovereignty.
And it wasn't just Mexico we have to think about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those immigration policies, that hardline stance, the increase in deportations, it all had a ripple effect throughout Central and South America.
It did. Her message, amplified by the Trump administration in general, really resonated in places like Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, countries where people were fleeing violence, poverty.
Right.
It created this climate of fear. People were hesitant to even try to come north.
Yeah, there's this report from think tank NGO Name that talks about the impacts on migrant communities in Central America.
Interesting.
It describes how people were even afraid to seek asylum,
Wow.
even if they had legitimate claims.
Yeah, because they were scared of being detained or separated from their families.
The U.S. has such a long history of involvement in Central America, you know.
It does.
Those historical ties, plus all the economic and political dynamics of the region.
It makes immigration such a complex issue.
It does, and Noem's policies definitely added another layer to all that.
Yeah, definitely complicated things.
So it sounds like her actions at DHS had these unintended consequences,
They did.
ones that went way beyond U.S. borders.
Exactly.
Which brings us to another piece of the puzzle, the fight against terrorism.
Oh, right.
Noem inherited a department that was still super focused on counterterrorism, you know, after 9/11.
How did she approach that part of the mission?
Well, from what I've read, she definitely continued to prioritize counterterrorism. But she also talked about the need to adapt to new threats.
Makes sense.
Like she talked a lot about cyber terrorism,
Oh, wait.
the need to invest in cybersecurity.
That was becoming a much bigger deal at the time.
It was. She recognized that terrorism was changing.
Yeah.
DHS needed to be ready for a wider range of threats, you know.
Right. Not just physical violence, but cyber attacks and things like that.
Exactly. We have a clip from a speech she gave at Name of University think tank where she says, "We can't afford to be complacent. The terrorists are constantly evolving their tactics, and we need to be one step ahead of them. That means investing in new technologies, strengthening our partnerships with other countries, and empowering our workforce to meet the challenges of the 21st century."
It sounds like she was really focused on innovation,
Yeah.
modernizing DHS.
Making sure they could handle everything from traditional terrorism to those cyber attacks and even emerging biological threats.
Okay, so she saw the need to adapt, but did she actually make any big changes to how DHS did counterterrorism?
She did make some pretty notable shifts.
Like what?
Well, for example, she pushed for more intelligence sharing
Okay.
between different agencies within DHS and with international partners. She also wanted to streamline things, reduce bureaucracy, which had been a problem for DHS for a while.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a good thing.
But were there any roadblocks?
I mean, anytime you try to change a big organization like that, you're going to run into some resistance.
Right.
Some people in DHS were hesitant about new technologies or new ways of doing things.
Makes sense.
Others felt like her focus on efficiency was maybe coming at the expense of being thorough.
It's a tough balance.
It is, and it sounds like she faced a lot of the same challenges that any leader of a big bureaucracy would face.
That makes sense.
I mean, leading DHS is a really demanding job.
Yeah.
You have to navigate all this internal politics, competing priorities, outside pressures.
It's a lot.
It is, and Noem's approach was to be decisive, assertive, focused on results. Whether that was always the most effective way to do things, well, that's up for debate.
Okay, so we've talked about the international side of Noem's policies, counterterrorism, the challenges of leading DHS.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
Let's bring it back home for a minute.
Back to the U.S.
Yeah. How did her actions play out in the domestic political scene?
Oh, that's a good one. Her time in office was definitely, how do I put this, a lightning rod.
For controversy.
Yeah, all that debate.
Especially those policies on immigration and border security.
Oh, yeah, those were really divisive.
Definitely energized her base, but also alienated a lot of Democrats, even some moderate Republicans.
It seems like she became this symbol of the Trump administration's stance on immigration.
Yeah, that hardline approach.
Which was such a big point of contention back then.
It was. Her strong rhetoric, the focus on enforcement, even pushing the boundaries of executive authority.
Right. It all made her a target for people who disagreed with the administration.
There's even a clip here from a Democratic senator. He's criticizing Noem's policies during a Senate hearing. He says, "Secretary Noem, your actions are cruel, inhumane, and a betrayal of American values. You are tearing families apart, demonizing immigrants, and undermining the rule of law."
That's a pretty strong statement.
It is, but it shows how much opposition she faced.
Yeah, but we should also say that she had a lot of supporters, too.
Right, especially people who felt like the Obama administration hadn't been tough enough on immigration.
Exactly. People who felt like a change was needed.
So it sounds like her time at DHS was a reflection of what was happening in the country as a whole.
Yeah, all that political polarization.
The debates about immigration, border security, the role of government, all those things were already really heated.
And Noem's actions just kind of threw fuel on the fire.
Makes you wonder how all of this affected her own political ambition.
Oh, right. There was talk that she might run for higher office.
Yeah, even the presidency.
Being at DHS definitely raised her profile, gave her a chance to show off her leadership and her conservative views.
Whether that helps her or hurts her down the line, who knows?
Only time will tell.
But one thing's for sure.
What's up?
She's a figure who still sparks strong feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of debate.
I think that just shows the impact she had.
Yeah.
As Secretary of Homeland Security, you might agree with her, you might not, but there's no question that she left her mark on the department. And on how we talk about these really big issues, security and immigration in this country.
Okay, we've covered so much in this part of our deep dive.
It's been a lot.
We looked at how her policies played out internationally, her approach to counterterrorism, those challenges of leading DHS, and all the political fallout.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but there's still more to explore.
Ooh.
What else?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to wrap things up by taking a look at the lasting legacy of Kristi Noem's time at DHS.
Okay.
And what it tells us about the future of the department and the bigger challenges facing the U.S.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been really digging into Kristi Noem's time as Secretary of Homeland Security.
It's been quite a journey. It has. We've seen her go from South Dakota rancher to this national figure, looked at those bold policies, unpacked how her decisions played out here in the U.S. and around the world.
A lot to consider.
So now I'm thinking, how do we make sense of it all? What's the lasting legacy of her time at DHS?
That is the big question, isn't it? Noem's leadership, it was a defining moment for DHS. I mean, I can't think of another secretary who caused this much controversy.
Right.
So much discussion. I think people are going to be debating her legacy for a long time.
From what we've seen, she definitely made some big changes, shifting priorities, moving resources around, implementing policies that really affected people.
Yeah.
But how do we even begin to assess whether those were good changes or bad changes?
That's the tricky part. There's no easy answer.
Right.
Her supporters, they'll tell you she made the country safer, strengthened border security, took a stand against illegal immigration.
Okay.
They point to the fact that border crossings went down while she was in charge and that she was tough on enforcement.
Hmm. We even have a clip here from a speech she gave just after leaving office to a group of supporters.
Oh, let's hear it.
She says, "I'm proud of the work we did at DHS. We faced unprecedented challenges, but we met them head on. We secured our borders, enforced our laws, and kept the American people safe."
It's a very confident statement.
It is. Very sure of herself. She believed she was doing her duty, protecting the nation,
Hmm.
and she didn't apologize for how she did it.
But as we've talked about, her critics see things very differently.
Aye.
They say her policies were cruel, inhumane, even counterproductive.
Right. They talk about the fear in immigrant communities, the families being separated, the damage to America's reputation abroad.
It raises some really important questions about security versus liberty.
Like, did her pursuit of security come at the cost of basic American values?
Exactly. Things like due process, compassion.
I think her time in office really showed us just how divided Americans are
Yeah,
when it comes to immigration and national security.
absolutely. Her time at DHS, it was like a mini version of all the political and cultural battles happening in the country.
And those battles are still going on today.
They are.
So, where does all this leave us? What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into Kristi Noem and DHS?
I think one of the biggest things is that the idea of Homeland Security, it's always changing.
Yeah, it's not just about stopping terrorism like it was right after 9/11.
Right. Noam had to deal with cyber attacks, pandemics, natural disasters, climate change,
So many different things.
and each one needs a different approach, different tools, a whole different way of thinking.
I think another takeaway is that being a leader in this field, it means making hard decisions,
Oh, for sure.
often without all the information you need, and with everyone watching you, judging you.
With Homeland Security, there's rarely a simple right answer or wrong answer.
It's about weighing those trade-offs, balancing different interests,
Trying to figure out what the unintended consequences might be.
and knowing that your decisions will have ripple effects, not just in the department, but across the country and around the world.
Absolutely. The Secretary of Homeland Security, their decisions affect so many people.
Yeah.
It's a job with a lot of power and a lot of responsibility.
Okay, as we wrap up our deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what can we learn from Kristi Noem's time at DHS? What can we take from all of this and apply it to the challenges facing the department today and in the future?
I think one of the most important things is that you need clear communication.
Okay.
Noam, she got a lot of criticism for how she talked about things. People thought it was divisive.
Right.
But in a role like this, you have to be able to explain your decisions
Yeah.
in a way that makes people trust you, even if they don't agree with you.
So finding that balance between being strong and being empathetic,
Yeah.
being decisive, but also being humble.
And realizing that good leadership in Homeland Security, it takes collaboration, not just within the department, but with other agencies, state and local governments, the private sector, even international partners.
It's a complicated challenge, and it's always changing.
It is. There's no one solution that works for everything.
But by looking at what worked for leaders like Kristi Noem and what didn't work,
We can get some valuable insights.
yeah,
Insights that can help us deal with the complexities of Homeland Security in the years to come.
I like that, learning from the past to prepare for the future.
That's what it's all about.
And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Kristi Noem and Homeland Security.
It was my pleasure.
It's been a fascinating look at this really important field,
It has.
and I hope you've learned something new along the way.
I know I have.
So until next time, stay curious.